Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Peer Review Week 2025 with Asian Council of Science Editor. It's so good and wonderful to have all of you with us as we continue to celebrate Peer Review Week this year at Asian Council of Science Editors. In our earlier panels this week, we have explored how publishers and editor-in-chiefs are rethinking the whole peer review in the age of AI. And today, we are widening the same lens to take a truly global view of how artificial intelligence is somehow shaking the whole peer review and editorial process. So, when it comes to peer review, it's never been one size fits all. It reflects different traditions, different infrastructures, and cultures. And as this year's peer review week remind us that rethinking peer review in the AI era, we are recognizing that these different differences and the different cultural values that truly that matters. And to help us explore that how artificial intelligence is shaping the peer review across different diverse contexts, we have joined by four exceptional voices from societies, global publishing houses, entrepreneurs, and reviewer recognition networks. So I want to start with a little bit of introduction for our today's panelists. First, we have Sven Fund, Managing Director of Reviewer Credits, the global peer review expert network. Sven has also led at Bertelsmann, Springer Nature, Deguter, and Wiley, a lot of experience, and he now invests in publishing startup through his company Full Stop, a consulting initiative. He brings a sharp view of how recognition, rewards, and incentives for reviewers may shift in the AI era. Our next panelist is Shehnaz Ahmed, from Director of Research and Publishing at the British Association of Dermatologists. With over 15 years of editorial experience, a good enough background from the Lancet to medical societies in the UK and India, she is deeply engaged with the future of open science and how AI will impact the integrity of medical research. Joining us as well is Jason Hu, Director of Research Integrity Engagement at Taylor and Francis, also a co-council member. Jason has held leadership roles at ORCID, Wiley, and served as the trustee of the Publishing Training Center. His focus is on research integrity, ethics, and global policy frameworks, all critical when we think about AI and peer review. And finally, we have invited Zeger Karssen, founder and CEO of World Brain Scholar, inventor of ELIZA, a AI-powered tool to facilitate peer review. Zeger previously founded Atlantis Press and has advised on Euro funding programs. So with his background in philosophy and AI and hands-on development of peer review tools like ELIZA and how these can help the peer review process, I think that he brings the academic, publishing, and entrepreneurial worlds on the one frame. So I want to start and begin today's discussion with some grounds on discussion with a shared question to all of the panelists. Artificial intelligence has been seeing for peer review that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It interacts with different publishing traditions, infrastructures, cultures from different sides. So, from your context, what is the most immediate change, positive or challenging, you're witnessing as AI enters peer review? And I want to start with Zeger. How do you see it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Maryam, for your introduction, for your good introduction. Thank you for inviting and having me here. Welcome to all of us, all of you, in this panel discussion, and also to the auditors. Yes, I will follow up on your question. As you may know, we founded our company a few years ago, and we are specializing in building AI tools for academic publishing, and notably for building AI tools that help the peer reviewer. That's the idea. So we're not about finding peer reviewers or doing pre-reviews or whatever. It's about really helping the peer reviewer doing his or her job. And coming myself also from the publishing industry, I used to work for Elsevier as a publisher. I also set up my own company in publishing. I know the publishing industry quite well, I must say. After 20 years, it's about time. And it is quite a traditional publishing, a good quite a traditional way of doing business. It has been always been working in this very similar ways until maybe a few decades ago, when internet arrived and when computer science arrived, when people started to digitize and to digitize the publishing process. But the thinking is still quite traditional, and this is also what we encountered ourselves. So when we built, in fact, the first tools in the area of AI, in the area of peer review, there was a lot of interest coming from publishers. Everybody contacted us and they wanted to see what it looked like, and they saw the tools, they were impressed by the tools. But between being impressed and seeing the tools and picking them up and to integrate them into our own work process, that is still a long way to go, I found out. Of course, there's a lot of reasons for this. There's the issue of integrity, the issue of hallucinations of AI, whether we can trust the sources which are used by AI. There are many issues we know of them. And this is these are the main reasons why publishers are reluctant, but at the same time, there is also, we feel from our side, when we talk to individual scientists, there's a real demand for this sort of technology, because many individual scientists are stuck with papers which are under review for a very long time, and this is, they think, many people think, especially young people think, and also people from Asia, for instance, they cannot accept anymore these long waiting times for peer review. So something has to be done. This cannot be solved by finding easier and more peer reviewers, because peer reviews are still very rare to find and become even more rare to be found because there's more and more papers coming in, and less people seem to be willing to do peer reviews for several reasons. So there is also technology needed here to help peer reviews, first of all, to do their job, but also to facilitate the job, in order to make peer review a more attractive activity for many people, because people are willing to do so, but they don't feel any support, at least not from the publishers. Publishers have set up some guidelines, and which are changing throughout the different journals, throughout the different publishers. There's no standardization, there's no methodology for doing a good peer review. So by setting up a tool, a first step in this direction has been taken by us. And this is for many people already a very difficult thing to accept, that peer review could also somehow be standardized. Like many scientific activities, this is the last resort where there's still being done a sort of nitty-gritty manual work, which has not been I wouldn't say industrialized, but at least standardized a little bit. So people have more insight in the process, and there will be more transparency. This is really lacking. This is really a big issue for many people. But there are common issues which we encountered. This is, first of all, that publishers want the human to be in control of the whole process, which is a very logical thing to do. I agree with that. The technology should not take over the whole process. For just as an example, our tool in the beginning was a completely automatic tool, which completely automatically generated peer reviews, and this is not what the publishers were waiting for, and we understand that. So we need human insight. We need that these tools are going to interact with the people who are working with them, so the people remain in control and remain responsible also for the final result. And the other thing which we also noticed is that AI is only at the beginning of this process. I think we see now AI coming into the peer review, but it will not be the last resort in the whole workflow from a publisher, and maybe not even in the whole workflow from a scientist. There's many places in the scientific publishing and scientific research where also AI can be of help. These are the first steps we are now going to take, and we are about to take, and we will also need to take them, because in our view, AI is here to stay. Like informatics and computer science technology in the beginning with internet was received quite coldly in the beginning. It now has completely integrated the whole process. We think the same will be the case for AI.
Thank you, Zeger. I want to move forward with the Shehnaz for how do you see AI in peer review?
Thanks so much, Maryam, and thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful panel, and I'm really delighted to be here. I think I'm going to bring a slightly different lens to everybody else, because I work for a small society, and I work with clinical dermatologists, so directly working with the community. So I think, and I think Zeger, you've probably touched on a lot of the challenges as well as, you know, some of the positives that AI. So I'm going to try not repeat myself, but try and bring a slightly different lens to it. You're quite right. Peer review hasn't evolved for the last 400 years in the format that it is. So it has existed. But I think what I think that peer review does, and that hasn't been touched upon, is that it develops critical thinking. So if you're an academic scientist, you're starting out in your career, this is such an important skill to learn, and it's not something that's taught to you at university. And I've spoken to a lot of early career scientists and researchers, and they're always a bit daunted. It's like, you know, how am I going to review that first paper? What's the first step I take? And like Zeger said, there is no industry systematic way. We have tried in our own little way to put out guidelines. One of the things when we were looking across is that no publisher puts their, and this is no disrespect to anybody, no publisher puts their peer review form online. So nobody knows. And actually, we've done that. We've tried to make the peer review form available to anybody. So anybody can go in, look at our review guidelines, look at the form, so that even if you're starting out new, you know, okay, that's the form I'm going to have to fill in. That's what I need to start thinking about. And I think while I completely agree with Zeger as well, that we've remained a very traditional industry where, and I hope my publishing colleagues will forgive me for saying this, but I do think we're slightly 25 years behind in terms of technology uptake. Even when it comes, if you follow the trend, we're a little bit, we have to be dragged in kicking and screaming. So Zeger has also mentioned some of the challenges that, you know, we all know there's a tsunami of papers coming across all our journals. I hear it firsthand from my editors. I have emails coming in from my reviewers saying I've spent over 20 hours on this particular paper because it was a guideline and it had 900 pages. And, you know, and I said, and I'm supposed to be an invisible reviewer. How do you justify that? And so I've got to find solutions. I do think it's a good start, Zeger, that companies like yourselves and others are coming up with solutions. I think we need it, but I think we need to develop these tools with the community, because what is important for us or my community to understand is what's the black box? What is the limitation of that tool? And the other thing, I caveat this because I have young teenage children, is over-reliance on a tool like this. You know, it's really easy to kind of get sucked into using a tool, and I can produce a review report in 10 minutes. And I think as an industry as well, we need to be careful about this whole narrative around everything has to be fast, everything has to be quick. Why aren't we talking about it has to be good quality? And that has been the benchmark. So for my journals, quality is the most important thing. And I do accept with what you said earlier, Zeger, that yes, sometimes it takes a long time to take peer review. And I think I take full responsibility that as a publisher, we're not proactive in informing the authors and saying, hey, we're struggling to find reviewers. And I think there are things that we could be doing. There are things we can use in AI. We are going to have to train our editors. I think you can't just use a tool and this thing it. You've got to look at where the tool can be applied, where the tool will be used in the workflow, how much time is going to be spent actually going through those reports to see whether, what it's pulled out as false positive. And we're trialing that right now. I've got a small team of 5 people. How many people am I going to have to pull out of business as usual to do this? So I think those are some of the factors. Then there is the case of biases, and I'll talk about more later on, but I think we can't forget that any system, even human beings, come with biases. So you've got to understand what is in it. So hopefully I've answered some of your questions, Maryam.
Thank you so much, Shehnaz, for bringing in like practical example. I want to quickly jump to Jason on how do you see AI integration and peer review process?
Thanks. So Zeger and Zeger and she has already said a lot about the current situation, challenges, and also Firstly, I want to echo so Shehnaz, so the last point, right? I totally agree. It's same. Regardless of it's a small a society publisher or like us, Taylor Francis, big publisher. We publisher has the responsibility as the gatekeeper of the quality of the publication. That's our the fundamental core the responsibility for the community. We definitely shall not to sacrifice the quality for speed, right? We fully understand, yeah, there's lots of challenges and issues within the peer review process, and it looks like the AI can potentially, provide some good sort of solution. But I want to say we needed to, from the publisher's the perspective, we needed to take a cautious the perspective rather than to rush. But in last 2 or 3 years, actually, many publishers, including Taylor Francis, we actually has been actively to explore, testing, developing, the tools, right? The thing I wanted to add is when we're talking about the peer review, actually, it's include many steps, right? From the basic, the technical checks on the text, image, citation, and the critical, the intellectual, the findings part, right? So when talking about the AI in peer review, I feel it's really helpful to break down the process of the peer review and to see which task can be better done by AI and which task cannot, right? So at least for now. As we all know that, across the submission, peer review, publishing process, there are already many tools, being available, either being developed by the publisher in-house or by the third-party companies, from the text overlapping checking, image multiplications, reference list, and so on, right? Some works well, some probably not there yet. From the other side, as a publisher, we do see lots of submissions, kind of being written, produced by AI without much the authors, so the editing, right? In reality, actually, currently, I can say no any tool is perfectly can detect them. It's a big challenge so for the publishers. And at this moment, I don't see, there's some magic thing. Any one tool can resolve the problem. Probably the solution, has to be go again. It depends on the what exactly the problem. Then there's some very specific tools might be able to help a bit, right? Then in the combination of the different tools, that might to help the editor, reviewers, and publisher to do a better job in terms of the peer review, so the quality. That might so the currently so the solution. I do not see one size can fit all. That's regarding the problems. So, but also we need to think about the subject. So the difference when we're talking about a peer review in biomedical versus the social science, it could be a very different thing, right? That also needed to be considered. Yeah. So my last point is I simply want to echo Zeger and she has it's really the human, so must be still be in the center of this process. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. I want to quickly move to Sven. How do you see the big AI in the big picture of peer review process?
First of all, sorry for participating from my car. I got a victim of a kindergarten processing for more playgrounds. So I hope you all support that good cause. Otherwise, I would obviously be at my home. Thanks for having me. And the big picture you are asking for, Maryam, review, finally, this field is starting to move. I think that's great. I think publishers have to take peer review serious in a way that they don't just look for 2 positive reviews, so they can progress with the publication process, but also that this is a very relevant part for researchers in terms of visibility, recognition, and probably also rewarding if there is a very unrewarding article that nevertheless needs to be reviewed. And we just had an example, 900 pages is crazy. That's a lot of work for somebody to do. Secondly, I think publishers should make sure that quality standards are being raised and not just kept. So I think that publishers could do much better in helping researchers to get trained when it comes to not only doing peer review properly, and the minority being a good author doesn't mean that you are a good reviewer, as much as being a good customer at a restaurant doesn't mean that you are a good chef in the kitchen. So obviously this needs to be trained. And I think thirdly, it's super important that researchers as reviewers understand how to deal with AI as a new technology. As a radiologist who wants to find the broken bone in your body, you would probably get trained on a specific machine, right? And I think that should also be true for peer reviewers. We see that there is a great openness to use peer review, like AI technology in support of peer reviewing, or the interesting work that has been published by Nature, for example, and a few others indicate that researchers are very open, but they feel insecure about what this technology can do and how to apply it correctly. And I think, well, in the end, publishers benefit from the fact that more is being published, right? Let's not forget that. Publishers want that. So I think it's in their very own interest to support that learning process with researchers, and probably also to build a more sustainable relationship with reviewers and not just use them as a spot market whenever they need them and then forget about them again, but really building and nurturing a relationship and saying, you know, you can become a ID member of our peer review cycle. Some publishers do that already, but I think across the industry, there's still a lot of need in that field where not only organizations like ACSE and others need to do work, but also publishers who benefit directly from better review, faster review, more reliable review.
Thank you so much, Sven, for sharing your thoughts on this opening debate. I want to quickly go to the Q&A round, and I would request the panelists to try to give us like a brief answer so that we compile the whole panel discussion within the time. I want to start with Sven again. You have been like working at reviewer credits. So reviewer credits, it operates at the intersection of recognition and rewarding for reviewers. So how do you see that artificial intelligence is reshaping the reviewer motivation and incentives? Because there's a good debate around incentivizing peer review, particularly in a global landscape.
Thanks for the question, because it's great. I think there are three elements that reviewers at large are interested in the peer review process, which is it should be rewarding intellectually, of course, and that's why many people do it. It should be recognized. It should be seen as part of the academic work, because people spend considerable time on this, and it should be efficient. Effective and efficient, both in that respect. So imagine you can reduce the peer review time per article from on average 6 hours to 3 hours by using an AI assistant, or even further. Zeger mentioned you can go even further there, but I think just saving 50% of the time that people have to spend on this would be a very rewarding mechanism, I think, and people would see that, researchers would see that they can, as reviewers, focus on the science, and they don't have to focus on the footnotes and all the other stuff that they sometimes also wrongly focus on. No publisher asks them to do it. Nevertheless, they do it because they want to kind of make the whole article better. But I think that's the three elements that are really important to move the field forward.
Thank you so much, Sven, for being too brief and covering the major picture of incentivizing peer reviews intellectually. I want to move forward with Shehnaz with a little bit of turn towards medical publishing. Medical societies like the BAD, they rely heavily on high quality peer review for clinical trust. So what are the unique risks that AI poses in medical peer review, especially around patient-related research?
Thanks, Maryam. And I think that's a really important point that you've touched upon. And I think, and Sven, I mean, I think you raised an important issue as well, saying, peer review is not efficient and there's a lot of time that can be saved. But also, I think there was something in the chat about biases, and it amplifies biases. And now when you're talking to a small specialty like dermatology, which is, I work with 2,600 clinical dermatologists who are members of us, and we're the national body. Now, in a small society like that, and in a small UK framework, everybody knows everybody. So, you can kind of, so if the system isn't trained well, or, has got inherent biases in it, those biases can be amplified. Maintaining that trust is really, really critical. Especially because our journals are sort of held as a benchmark, and people will relate to it. The other issue is about, I think I want to bring the patient lens into this as well. Now, patients often give consent to participate in a study, and they are told that their factors will be anonymized, the data will be anonymized. But I've also read in the BMC Ethics, I think there was a paper that was published back in 2021, and it says that the LLMs can actually, what's the word? Sort of remove the anonymization, which is quite a scary factor for patients. So first of all, medical societies need to give clinicians a framework to say that if you are going to put your patient data into an LLM, you need to know, and I'm sort of slightly digressing here. It's not strictly related to peer review, but sort of these factors kind of feed into the whole research ecosystem. But there is also the case where you have small case series or case studies that come in, which are really unique, really haven't been read before. And if you're using AI and the system hasn't read it before, what's going to happen is it might actually. And again, because LLMs by their very nature are designed to give an answer, will probably say, oh, actually, you should disregard it, or it's too narrow. But however, again, maybe Zeger and Sven and others like you who are working in this space could kind of find ways around it where the system is trained so it can actually go analyze all of the databases and say, look, this is what I've pulled from the literature, and it matches or it doesn't match. And then the reviewer sort of has to take a step back and think about it. Is this making sense or not? And in my own little experiments, when I've done with AI, is, if Copilot or ChatGPT does something, I'll say, okay, well, how did you arrive at this conclusion? Or what's the link? So I want to know or understand the background to that. The other issue is, I think images, they can be problematic. Again, it depends on your data set. Everybody knows garbage in, garbage out. But, apart from that, it's not used if it doesn't have a wide enough data set for those unique, small, rare diseases. It can be problematic. So again, I think, as Sven, you mentioned about training, I think training is just so important, not only in peer review, but also, how to use that tool, where in the process, Jason, you mentioned it, should it be used? I think we're all going to need training how to do that. So I think it's a learning curve for all of us, and we're learning as we go along. That's it from me.
Perfect. Thank you, Shehnaz. I want to move quickly towards Jason. With the COPE lens, COPE is setting the tone globally for publication ethics. And what ethical red lines do you believe must be drawn when it comes to artificial intelligence in peer review?
So before I go to the red line, I just wanted to explain COPE. COPE is being known, for its so many of the guidelines and flowchart, right? I just want to explain. Actually, so before COPE come out with so those kind of the guidelines, one of the COPE's mission is to lead and facilitate the discussion regarding the ethical issues in our industry. So it's usually start, for some emerging issues like AI, right? It's usually start with some kind of the forum or the webinars. If I remember correctly, COPE's first forum or the webinar around AI probably happened around 2019. When the AI probably just started to emerge. And after, since that, there were a few, the webinars and discussions around the AI regarding the authorship, regarding the peer review, and and decision making, right? And a couple of years ago, COPE, so based on those webinars and discussions, so COPE released a discussion document, really to continue to facilitate, the discussion. And 2 years ago, rightly after the ChatGPT, got the quite a viral excitement from the community, right? Then COPE released a position statement about the authorship, to emphasize that AI cannot be listed as an author. So back to your question regarding the red line, the authorship is definitely one of them. AI cannot be listed as an author and reviewer as well, right? So because it cannot take the responsibility, as being required. The red line I want to say is the confidential entity. Because currently COPE's position and also many the publishers the position are quite aligned, right? So we do not allow the reviewer to upload the manuscripts to the AI tools. Because it simply we do not know how those manuscripts might be processed, used, stored by those AI tools, right? And the confidentiality is long-standing principle and agreement between the reviewer, journal's editor, right? So that's kind of a red line. It must be so respected. The other is really the transparency and the accountability. So far, AI, by nature itself, one thing is we don't know, how the AI is being trained, right? So what kind of the data and how they are being trained by, for the different, so the AI, the models. The other thing is AI, the algorithm, so itself is a black box. It's the nature of this, so the technology. Currently, even the developer and the researcher don't really understand how that black box works. It works, but we don't understand why and how, right? So that's the kind of also the nature of this. In terms of this, and yeah, then in terms of the intellectual critical the judgment evaluation, you can't really depend on AI, right? It has to be human, and it has to be the editor and the reviewers. So that's so something I feel is very important line to draw. So of course, the editor or the reviewer can use AI tools as assistant, on some specific questions. So regarding the manuscript, it's probably fine, right? But I want to say that still need a very solid human judgment core. What kind of the question to ask and whether or not you want to take the answer from the AI, right? So that's I feel it's very important. And the other one, just being reminded by so Shehnaz, when you mentioned the bias, right? Because yeah, again, the AI might have been trained by quite a narrow sort of data, even though they are claimed as a large language model, right? But it might have been under represented the region, gender, the race, right? So there's might be bias. Then if you don't really understand the training data, you probably don't understand so what kind of bias so the model itself has. So that's something I feel is needed to be very, very careful as well. So yeah, so that's kind of the red lines so pop into my mind.
Appreciate that, Jason. And moving towards Zeger, you have worked on peer review bottlenecks worldwide, I would say, and with more submissions coming from non-Western countries, while review is still dominated by Western countries, so and Western scientists. So delays and biases that will actually grow. So how do you think that AI tools like ELIZA could help address these?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, well, what we found when we were presenting our tools to the several publishers from the US, Europe, but also in Asia, is that, and this is also what is substantiated by data we got from the different investigations. There's an unease with many scientists when they receive a request for a peer review. Of course, there are already a lot of experienced scientists who select which paper they're going to review, but there's a lot of people who are potentially could be a reviewer, especially people who are younger people coming from universities or having done their PhD, but also people from regions where peer review has not been yet integrated in the curriculum of an education, scientific education, where they would be very willing to do a peer review, but they feel very uneasy about it for several reasons. One reason is, first of all, it could be language reason. If you're not a native English speaking person, doing a peer review of an English language article and writing the peer review in English is quite a challenge, as I should say. But also it's about how to do a peer review, how to perform a peer review. And this comes back to the question about there's no real standardized way of doing peer reviews, which we already discussed before. People need some guidance here. And of course, publishers publish their guidelines sometimes, and these guidelines differ throughout the different publishers. So there's no real standard guidelines. So it's important for people, they feel uneasy about how to do a peer review. In fact, it of course, it depends on the type of article you have at hand, the kind of type of discipline, but there's always a number of typical questions which could be accessed during the peer review, and people have no idea how to do this. Which questions are these and how to do this? So what we developed, in fact, is in an interactive peer review. So we ask people to write down the first jet of what they think about the different issues, about whether this is innovative or whether it has been well constructed, whether research is well sourced, etc. And according to this first input, we, through our tool, suggest improvements of these comments. So the critical thinking, which was already aborted by Shehnaz, is also somehow included in this process, because people can write whatever they think about the paper within the constraints of whether it is innovative, whether there's weak points, whether there are highlights in the article. But it is always supported by the tool. The tool will not judge the paper. The tool will not judge the reviewer either. It will just suggest improvements in order to substantiate what has been said by the reviewer and make the review more complete. It goes always along the lines of the reviewer. It will never contradict the review. Okay, that's not the idea. So we analyzed, in fact, the first jet of the review. We compare it with the article. The tool is also aware of the article itself, and then the tool will bring suggestions to review how it could be formulated better or more completely, or with adding additional information. Okay, coming from the paper. That's what the tool does. It doesn't direct you anywhere. Okay. So this makes the tool more easy also to use for people who are not very used to doing peer reviews. And it will open up a new pool of reviewers, in fact, where people say, well, I don't have a lot of experience. I was not educated in doing peer review, but this tool will guide me throughout the process. And this will then, in our view, help also to expand the pool, and therefore also speed up the way the time which is needed for finding peer reviews and doing the peer review. It's a guidance process. So this way we hope to lower in fact the barrier for many people to say yes to the next invitation. Of course, this is not a tool for an experienced peer reviewer who already has his or her way of doing and dealing with these, but for many people who want to do peer reviews and don't feel up to the task, this can help a lot for them, okay, in terms of knowledge how to do the peer review, but also in language, for language issues. For instance, you can write down in our tool in your own language what you think about the paper, and it will then be translated automatically into decent English, okay? So this is also about alleviating barriers and doing peer review. So this way the peer review, the potential peer review, will feel supported in doing the peer review, and way more than just a vague guideline coming from the publisher, which is varying throughout the different publications anyway. Okay, so in this way we think that the tool can also help alleviating the bottleneck which is now around, where many articles are coming more and more from other parts of the world than the Western world. So let's say mostly from Asia. But we see also in the statistics that the reviewers are still mostly Western. Okay. So we also need to shift the peer review, not only the writing of the articles, but also the peer review more and more to Asia. And this is also the aim of this tool in order to make this task of the peer review more accessible for many people who have no experience and no education in this area, whatever. Okay. But that's what I wanted to say about how this tool can help indeed to not, I wouldn't say eradicate the bottleneck, but at least enlighten the bottleneck and alleviate a little bit, and also shift the peer review not more to the Asian countries as well.
Thank you so much, Zeger, for the detailed overview and perspective from your side. I want to move quickly towards our second round for questions. I would request a brief answer from panelists for this time to complete the panel on time. I want to start with Sven. You have like a good cross-platform working experience. So from your work across diverse publishers, do you think that artificial intelligence will widen the gap between well-resourced institutions and smaller players? Or can it be like help level the playing field?
Yes, I think it will. Well-resourced institutions are well-resourced because they can gain a competitive advantage out of that, and that is true for institutions on the teaching and learning and research side, but also for publishers that are bigger and have more resources to spend. I think AI is a specific case in the midterm, at least. I mean, we know that digitization has given so many more people access to so many more tools, solutions, content, whatever out there, that I would expect that for AI as well. We already have relatively low cost for individuals to use such a tool. But again, I think it is, as always, a matter of, do you know what to do with the tool and how to handle it? And that will be important. And for that, it is not important anymore that you are in one specific institution or work with one specific platform or publisher, but that you smart yourself in the process. So I think AI smartness will be part of any researcher skill set going forward.
Perfect, Sven. Moving towards Shehnaz, continuing the speciality of society's angle. So how can smaller specialty associations like yours particularly approach adoption in peer review without losing the community-driven aspect of their review culture?
Thank you, Maryam. And again, I think the community is at the heart of it. So any tool that we have to adopt, we have to take the community with us. I think, Jason has said very articulately about how important the rigor is and how important trust is. That it takes decades to build that trust, but it takes one, mistake, and then you kind of lose trust within the community very easily. So for us, we're very cautious. The community is very cautious. And for us to bring AI adoption, we need to bring the community with us. I think it would be great for us if we could work in a small group with some of the early people who are, like Zeger and others who are kind of doing some of the stuff already, to start talking and have these conversations with our community. I think Sven is right. There is going to be a whole level of training and education needed. And just to add to an earlier point, Sven, we are actually doing hands-on training in our community on a peer review, or maybe, sorry, it was Zeger who mentioned that, training isn't done, peer review isn't, it's quite like you assume people know, but we're actually doing hands-on practical. This is how you do it. And it's great that your tool does it. So I'm hoping, and the other thing I would say is that for a small society, you could start a small experiment, but we need to get the permission of authors. We need to get the buy-in of the community. We need to get the buy-in of a publisher. We have to know all of the limitations of that data set. I think, Jason, you mentioned that earlier as well, because without that, it will fail. I think the biggest challenge for us is we work with full-time clinicians. They're doing this over and above that. They are completely inundated. So identifying the tool, applying it in the workflow so it helps the editor and doesn't actually add to their time point. So I think we're going to have to do and we are doing some small tests, but for a small society like us with a small team, it is challenging, and I'm hoping that some of the bigger players are doing a lot more experiments. I'd like to see a lot more papers coming out. So I don't know, Zeger, if you published, but if you've done like a trial, it will be interesting to see if you've actually published some of that trial to see what you've done and taken a peer review assisted paper and a normal paper and compare the two. Love to see that. And yeah, I think, but human critical thinking needs to be at the center of any peer review decision making. And all I would say is I think the EU has done a fantastic job in the AI Act, Policy Act. And, you know, where they say any decision making needs to be at the human. I think it's what we as an industry need to adopt and actually standardize things.
Perfect, Shehnaz. Moving forward towards Jason, from your role at Taylor and Francis, how do you see that the policy frameworks evolving to ensure that artificial intelligence is implemented responsibly across diverse journal platforms?
Yeah, so for those of you who might not know, so Taylor Francis, we actually publish around 2,500 journals across all the major subjects from STM to social science and humanity. So to us, Taylor Francis, you know, when we think about any policy, we do need to think about, you know, the policy to apply to our whole portfolio, but also, you know, to recognize there's differences across the different subjects areas, right? So that's a challenge that we are facing, and then we need to work out. The other thing is for any of the policy, I think we simply need to remind ourselves our core responsibility as a publisher is, you know, is to make sure that the content we publish is high quality and is trustable, right? So that's one of our core mission. And it's similarly, you know, when we to think about, you know, the AI, the policies, so what shall be allowed to use AI or not, right? I think so that's one of the core principle we need to consider. Talking about that, I think we took a cautious but proactive approach. I think, you know, actually, Taylor Francis came out AI policy very quickly, 2 or 3 years ago. You know, we very clear to define, you know, the so the requirement policy for the authors, for the editors, and for the reviewers. But also we recognize, you know, actually this area indeed evolves super fast, right? You know, what we don't know now probably, you know, could be totally changed in 2 weeks' time, right? So we do recognize that. So just sometime around 2024, I think we updated our AI policy further. So by saying that, you know, we feel, yeah, you know, we need to keep up about the latest development about the AI technology itself, but also we work very closely with other, you know, the organization like COPE, like STM, you know, or other the industries bodies that to align, you know, our practice. Eventually, we probably, you know, like many other so the areas, we probably need really to align, you know, across the industry for the best practice. But yeah, you know, for now, there's still no clear consensus on many things, and you know, we so at Taylor Francis we are so actively, you know, testing and developing, you know, the tools, right? So and then to watch and then be ready to evolve again.
Perfect, Jason. Moving towards Zeger, based on your experience implementing your peer review tool, ELIZA, with societies and publishers worldwide, what lessons have you learned about how publishers are approaching AI integration into the workflows?
Yeah, like I already informed you in the beginning of this discussion, there is a lot of interest from all the societies, of course. We noticed societies, but also from commercial publishers and less commercial publishers, because many people understand that this is a technology which is there to stay and which can also be very helpful, but in a controlled way, as ever. So We discussed with publishers throughout the different continents and US and Europe. I saw that, as I saw already before, that in Asia, the eagerness to pick up this technology and integrate it into the workforce is a little bit higher than, for instance, in Europe, where there's a lot of vested interest and a lot of questioning about the integrity of science in general. And these are important issues which have to be dealt with. But again, it's there to stay, and we should somehow be able to encompass it into a framework where we can make it as useful as possible. And I think for that, we need, first of all, to make sure that always the human being, and this is also what we got the feedback from the publishers, the human being should be in control, of course, and also take the responsibility for everything. This is the big hiccup, of course, with now these days, these LLMs and ChatGPT, where no one takes any responsibility for those replies you get from ChatGPT. They can tell you anything, nobody is accountable. This is a very big issue, and this means that if you would use LLMs in your systems or AI in your rear view or in your editorial process, you should make sure that those who are using it are responsible for the results. That's one thing. And this is one thing which we learned and integrated also in our tool. Hence the interactivity and hence the final overview and control always by the reviewer or the editor of the process. Okay. Secondly, there's also the privacy issue, which is a big thing. For you already mentioned, I think, Shehnaz. When you give input to a chat, GTP, or another LLM-related system, it is very likely that your information is going to be used for enriching these LLMs again, which means that your input, whether it is a personal input, but also the manuscripts which you're uploading whatsoever, are being used and thrown somehow on the public, on a public platform, and reused for generating new replies from a ChatGPT, for instance. This is a very delicate issue. There's a lot of controversy about it, relating also to IPR issues, where people feeling that their texts are being misused by ChatGPT or other LLMs. But this is a big issue, and we need to make sure, and this is a task for the publishers and societies, that anything which is being used by an LLM within the framework of society publishing or company publishing is the privacy is controlled and secured. So nothing goes out of the system into a publicly available system. This is possible technically, and we, for instance, we did it, and this is one of the issues which many publishers feel bad about it, and this is something which needs to be solved. Last thing, this has to do with integrity again, is also about hallucination, for instance, coming from LLMs, where LLMs invent sources, invent citations, or invent even text or complete articles as an extra additional to your reference list. This is something which you have to combat. You can do it technically. We did it also by better prompting, by better securing also that the sources which you are using for training your LLMs are trusted resources. We, for instance, we use for our training, we use a lot of reviews and editorial decisions coming from checked and trusted open source databases, and don't get them just out from the internet like most of the LLMs do, but use trusted sources. And this is also about the integrity again of the scientific process. On the other hand, and replying to what we have learned, on the other hand, we see from many, again, for many individual people, individual scientists, they understand the possibilities we have with using this technology, and they really ask for it. They want this process to speed up the process. They want more transparent and more understandable processes, where feedback coming from the editor once an article has been accepted or has been refused is clear and understandable and constructive too. Not just say, well, this article does not fulfill our requirements. Tell them why, which requirements are involved here. And the transparency is a big thing for many authors. Reviewing is not just about saying this article can be accepted, this one cannot be accepted. It's also about educating your authors. If an author, a younger author, is submitting an article to your journal, you refuse it, tell them why it has been refused. So the next time he or she comes back, the article will be much better because it will more be compliant with your criteria. And this is also a learning process. So therefore, it's important that the review feedback is constructive and transparent. People know why it has been reviewed and how it could be done better next time. Okay, and again, also about the unbiased. Again, what Jason and Shehnaz also mentioned. We don't want reviewers to have already a prejudice regarding your article because it comes from a certain country, because of your name, because of your affiliation, because of your sex, whatever. This is something which we should avoid. I agree, Jason, that some LLMs are trained only on Western data, so there is already inherent somewhere a bias. That's absolutely correct. But this is an issue for many authors. They feel really very badly treated sometimes when they submit an article. They wait for 6 months, or at the best, mostly it's 12 months, and they get very, very blunt, short answer back. Your article is not good enough. That's not what they're waiting for. This should be much more constructive and more positive. Okay, so in this way, we trained also our tool to give this sort of constructive and polite and unbiased feedback, and that's important for many people, authors, but also I think it will also, well, publishers talk about client service. It will also be a better service to your clients for publishers, which are the authors, of course. But authors really feel treated correctly and unbiased, in an unbiased way.
Thank you, Zeger. I would say that this round really, really highlights that divide between opportunity and somehow caution part when we apply AI in peer review. So from resources gap to cultural differences that we see to policy safeguards, together, I think these perspectives show that just how global and complex this whole AI and peer review truly is. So I want to come up to the wrap-up side for final thoughts from all of the panelists. I want to have like one quick thought that you would like to leave as a key message for the global scholarly community. How can we keep AI in peer review inclusive, ethical, and globally relevant? How do you see it, Sven?
Well, I guess that's the $1 million question. I want to be counterintuitive, if I may, and I think using technology where we know it has shortcomings, and we are highlighting these shortcomings, it's obviously important to also highlight that human beings have shortcomings. Researchers in North America and Europe are also primarily trained on material from North America and from Europe, from specific institutions. That's why specific institutions have a prominence, and they are also being replicated more easily in publisher systems because a publisher prefers publications from a prestigious organization with a lot of additional information and additional whatever H indexes and so on that come with the author. So I think as much as it is important to watch out for this, we should not take this as a limit, but as Zeger, I think, does primarily because he's working with ELISA and others, on ELISA with others. I think it's super important to just make clear that there is no way around technology here. And it's a little bit like discussing whether the radiologist should use the X-ray or not. There is no alternative to using technology. The question is just how we make it as good as possible. And it will never be perfect. I think that's clear.
How would you like to add something to it, Shehnaz, the key point or key takeaway?
I think, I echo everything Sven has said and everybody else has said. Ensure the system that you use is transparent, ethical, and inclusive. I think we often talk about diverse voices, which are very important, but inclusion is always an afterthought. I think don't make inclusion an afterthought, and ensure that whatever system you use or tool you develop has got that built into it right from the beginning. So it needs to be into the DNA. I think you need to test and audit your system to check it is inclusive. Is it ethical? And is it globally relevant? Because we need to be globally relevant. We can't let this whole global north and global south divide continue. And there is a real opportunity with these AI tools, I think now, to put the positive spin on it, to ensure real inclusion and to systematically address some of these existing biases in the system. And I think last but not the least, I would say is we as human beings need to use inclusive language, culturally sensitive language, so that the tools can then be trained to use that language. That's it.
Perfect. So how do you see it, Jason?
I just wanted to remind us, we are in the world of searching the researchers and so the innovation. And many of the research already shows that what can facilitate the innovation and creativity, right? One is the diversified view from the different the background. Two is the engagement between people. There was a research say, what is the biggest loss, when, everybody work from home, so versus within office. Actually, it's many cases, actually, it's the small talk in a cafe within the office, rather than you might have new ideas about how to improve your work, right? So that's so something being lost by also working from home. I think in terms of the peer review of the research articles, it's a similar thing. The purpose of the peer review is not just evaluating a paper, right? As Shehnaz so mentioned, is part of the critical thinking, and Zeger so mentioned the learning, but also it's a communication and a discussion between peers about the research, right? So that cannot be replaced by AI. And actually, I will be very worried if it will be replaced by AI, right? Saying that means the future creativity and innovation will be lived in the hand of very few number of the models, right? It's probably so not a good thing. So that's the thing I wanted to remind us, regardless, how sophisticated the tool seems to be, regardless how exciting you want it to be, regardless how painful problems you want to resolve. But I think we need to remind us our core responsibility and purpose.
Okay, so moving to Zeger, how do you would like to add some tea?
Yeah, well, I want to follow up on what Jason and Shehnaz said. Indeed, thank you for that. Yeah, AI tools, as we know, so far are not good in innovating and communication. Augmenting communication with the scientists. I think we should, well, first of all, AI is there to stay. I agree with Sven, this is the technology and it should be there, and we should frame it as much as we can and only exploit there where it is good at. And where is AI good at in this time? And this is about, AI is good at digesting a lot of information. Okay, that's very good. It can easily summarize or synthesize texts coming from many sources into very clearly stated summarizations of these texts. And this is handy for peer review. This is handy for editors, okay? Regarding different articles, different peer review reports you get in, to get a general idea of what the peer reviewer said about a certain paper. It gives you already a first taste of what the peer reviewers think about the paper. Is there consensus, or is there no consensus, whatever. This is very helpful. AI is also very good to be used as a sort of sparring partner, which we also included in our tool. We have a chat box, which is we call it a paper-aware chat box. So the chat box knows about the paper, and the peer reviewer or the editor can discuss with the chat box about this paper. Has for instance, question like, has the author included a statement of interest, of conflict of interest in the paper? Has the author included sources, and which sources are these? So instead of going through the whole paper again, it can easily come back with information about the paper. This is a sort of retrieval, but also a more intelligent way of retrieval information from the paper, instead of which avoids to read everything yourself again. And last thing is also about, for instance, checking references. Papers sometimes have very long references lists. Well, most of the reviewers are okay. The reviewers are supposed to check all these references. Of course, this is part of your review process. Are the references indeed valuable, are valid, are they real references, and do they have a link with the paper indeed? Or are many of these references invented, or are these self-citations, which is also a big issue in publishing? Well, their AI is very good at, and to check all the references and check whether these references are indeed linked to the paper in terms of the semantically, in terms of the subject field, but also whether these are real references indeed, and not invented. Some or references to only your own work of the paper, of the author of the paper. Yeah? So, and this is a very time-consuming task, and this is something AI can do in a split second. So, in this way, the peer review report can be much more complete because AI is there where it needs, where it is needed, and where it is good at. That is digesting a lot of information and give back feedback. And this is not about critical thinking again. Like Shehnaz and Jason mentioned before, it's about accompanying critical thinking of a peer review, but it's not replacing it. It's really trying to support this critical thinking and to bring in additional information in order to make this critical thinking much more substantiated. So again, AI is there to stay, and it should be framed in a very neat way, in a very complete way, and we should exploit these different issues of AI, the digesting, using chatbots, fast checking of many resources. This way, it can be of great help for many peer reviews and also for the editors. But always, as again I said before, the final word and the final responsibility remains always by the human being using this AI.
All right, thank you so much, Zeger, and all of the panelists for sharing the key takeaways for today's session. I want to take quick one or two questions from the chat and then move forwards towards our final wrap-up side. I want to take it from you, Sven, that you have like a cross-platform experience. So there's a question that what's the difference between AI-assisted peer review versus AI-generated peer review?
Well, in my view, first of all, platforms, since you mentioned them, and workflow systems are still very weak in AI assistance to the reviewer themselves. It is being used in pre-review and in other steps in the manuscript preparation, but I think publishers are still very wary of whether to implement AI or not, and researchers are as well in using it, as I said earlier. So I think there we are really at the beginning, and we all need to see now platforms integrating it. In my view, an AI assistance clearly is a co-pilot, and I don't mean the tool, a co-pilot that helps you basically going through steps, pre-structuring text in a way that you have a standardization as a reviewer. I think we have heard that from basically everybody on the panel, that it is a major disaster that publishing never got to a point where peer review is standardized, because there are differences, yes, but it is not a new genuine process for every other journal. And both small and big publishers share the burden here. I think AI-generated reviews in terms of please review this article, ChatGPT, and only give positive review remarks, that is something different. And I think we all see that very critically, because the technology is not at that point yet that it can work in a way that is helpful. So I think, in my personal view, a lot of platforms start to bring in assistance to the reviewer in different degrees, but I think no platform really goes for a full AI review in an accepted way. But there's no doubt, Zeger mentioned that there has been experiments in the past where you could do, and I think you did that with ELIZA as just a brain experiment, saying, can this tool do it all at once? I think it brings remarkable results, but you should not let it off the leash.
One question more that I want to pick for Jason. There is one anonymous question that what is the panelist's view on proactive collaboration of entities aiming to develop AI tools for helping academic publishing with policy setting entities like COPE?
So sorry, can you repeat the question? What are
the views as an expert for you that for proactive collaboration of entities aiming to develop AI tool for helping academic publishing with policy setting entities like COPE?
Yes. I want to say it's been welcomed, to proactive to collaborating. In principle. I guess it has to be case by case because when we are talking about the AI tool, there is the AI model developer like ChatGPT, Facebook, Llama models, right? There are the models, the fundamentals of models. There are the tools built upon the models, right? Then there are some other tools, so built upon so further, right? So when we are talking about the AI tools, company technology, might be quite a different thing, right? So I want to say it has to be case by case, but I want to say in general, it will be very helpful for both sides to understand more about each other, like for the publisher side or for the code, to understand how the AI tool is being developed, being trained, and so on, right? And from the other side, the AI company, right? In many cases, they might have got many PhDs, in the computer sciences, for example, right? But it is not necessarily in many other social areas. They do not so necessarily understand well about how the peer review and academic publishing works, right? So I feel the proactive and the collaborative conversation will help because eventually we are aiming the same thing. I think from the publishing world, we want some tools can do the job, can help the job, but we do not want some fake hope, right? And being claimed that says it can, but actually it cannot, right? So yeah.
Perfect. So now, before we move to the wrap-up side, I want to request all of the attendees, if you are comfortable, please put on your camera so that we can have like a screenshot for today's attendees and then move towards the final wrap-up for today's panel discussion. It's not mandatory. If you are comfortable, just put on the camera so that we can cover the screens of the attendees from different regions joining us today. Have like a 3 to 4 screens, so just hold on with me. Just giving you a sec more to put your cameras on right? We have like a good diversified audience joining us today and hearing for the panel discussion celebrating Peer Review Week 2025 with Asian Council of Science editor. Right, perfect. So thank you to all of the panelists joining us today, Sven, Shehnaz, Jason, and Zeger, for bringing such a rich range of perspective, and thanks to the audience joining us from different regions. What we heard today is that while AI might be one such system that we are trying to explore, its impact is shaped by many contexts: cultural, maybe ethical, medical, entrepreneurial, and institutional. So we have to take everything in account when we apply AI in peer review and editorial workflows. So if peer review is to remain trustworthy and trusted globally, it will depend on how well we adopt to AI to serve different communities, different commitments, rather than forcing everyone into the world to mold. And on behalf of Asian Council of Science Editors, I want to thank all of you for being part of today's panel discussion of Peer Review Week 2025. And we look forward to continuing this dialogue across borders and disciplines. Thank you once again, and we look forward to continuing these global conversations, helping out the community from ACSE platform through Peer Review Week and beyond. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.